What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. We're going over my core plays for week 12 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel Thanksgiving edition, which happy Thanksgiving to everybody that celebrates one of the best holidays of the season: family, food, friends, football. What more can you ask for? But anyway, if you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, if you like what you see on the screen behind me, it's available completely free for a week over on my Patreon. Links down below in the description or the pinned comment. If you like it, you can stay. If not, tell me to kick rocks. I don't care either way. It's got all the data I look at every single week to help build successful lineups, projections, optimizer, ownership projections, my cheat sheet, my Discord community, which is always fun 24/7. So if you want to check it out, like I said, you know where to find it. But let's get into it. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. And I really only like 3 of these guys, maybe 4. But other than that, I don't really have any interest in Geno Smith on this slate or Jordan Love. If I'm playing 150 max, which I'm going to on this slate, I might get a couple of sprinkles of them in there just in case they happen to go bananas. But I am not expecting that, and I will be underweight, even at lower ownership. But I would say the chalk of the slate is going to be the man up top, Dak Prescott at $6,800. Now, it's a bit tougher to fit him in over on FanDuel, and I did kind of realize it seemed like DraftKings pricing was much softer across the board. So if you're over on DK, you can pretty much play whoever you want. On FanDuel, you have to think about it a little bit, but it's still a situation where you can pretty much build whatever main stack you want to. But Dak will be the chalk quarterback here. I think that's pretty clear. 29.5 implied team total for the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington Commanders, which just so happens to be the best matchup you can ask for a quarterback. They're ranked dead last, 32nd versus the position, 23 points per game, 270 passing yards, and over 2 passing touchdowns. And we know just how good this Dallas passing attack has been over the past month now. They started off slow, but man, they have been good. And with the highest implied team total in the slate and the highest over-under of the week, it's really hard not to like them. Now, the only concern would be that they're 10.5 point favorites, but that has not stopped Prescott before. And then we have Jared Goff playing at home in the Dome, which is always where he plays his best football. Although last week, very uncharacteristic 3 interception versus Chicago Bears, who really aren't that good of a pass defense. But a 27 point implied team total here, 7.5 point favorites at home versus the Green Bay Packers. Now, I kind of prefer the run game in this one, but I can't get too picky because you just can't play Dak Prescott in 100% of your lineups. Well, I guess you can, but that's a lot of eggs in one basket. And he's not going to offer you any rushing upside. And like I said, this matchup's a little bit tougher. They're 6th fewest in points per game allowed to the position. The Packers are at 14.9, only 200 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. But at this price point, with how good the Lions offense is, especially at home, it's going to be hard for him to not at least hit value, I think, at $6,300. Sam Howell, he has been great for fantasy purposes this year, but this is a pretty tough matchup versus that Cowboys defense, who are allowing the same 6 fewest points per game to the position. Also, only a 19 point implied team total, so the touchdown equity is not going to be as high. The one thing he does have going for him is a positive game script, with them being 10-point dogs on the road, so they should be chugging the ball a lot, which is not anything out of the ordinary for Sam Howell. They're throwing the ball nearly 37 times per game this season, which is one of the highest in the entire league, getting about 20 yards on the ground as well. So despite the tough matchup, I'm fine with him in tournaments, but I would prefer Goff overall just because I think the Lions will be able to put up more points. And then we have Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, who happens to just be pretty good at playing quarterback for the 49ers. I don't know if he's a system quarterback or if he's actually somewhat decent. It might be a bit of both, but it works out very well for that team. And they have a 25 point implied team total on the road in Seattle as 7 point favorites. He's averaging nearly 270 passing yards, nearly 2 passing touchdowns, not turning the ball over too much. The one thing I don't like is the volume's not usually high for Brock Purdy, only throwing the ball 25 times per game, but he's been very efficient. 9.7 yards per attempt, and he has great weapons surrounding him in Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, so it's really hard for him to fail. Plus, this is a pretty decent matchup versus Seattle. They're about mid to below average versus quarterbacks this season, and allowing over 250 yards and about 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. So he's cheap. These guys are all pretty much the same play once you get to Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, and Sam Howell, but Dak Prescott's definitely a tier above the rest. And heading over to our build here, like I said, 4 quarterbacks I have interest in. 3 I have a decent chunk, but the number 1 for me is going to be Dak Prescott, and I think that's pretty obvious, although the same thing will be said by everybody else playing, so we'll have to try to get different somewhere, but we're going to have to deal with it for right now. Moving on to running backs, just a few that I like here, but I do think the ownership will be very condensed, especially on Christian McCaffrey. We know the ownership's going to be extremely high there. He is going to be by far the best projection play on this slate at this position, and a top 2 projection play overall with him in CD Lamb. But CMC, he's going to be a must in cash games, in my opinion. Definitely the safest player on the entire slate with his volume. It's a great spot versus Seattle. 7 point favorites, not at home, but a 25 point implied team total. And Seattle is currently allowing the 5th most points per game to the running back position, and nearly 45 receiving yards and over 5 catches which is right up CMC's wheelhouse. But he's going to typically get you close to 18 carries per game, right around 5 targets, nearly a 20% target share in the season. He's a touchdown scoring machine, nearly at 5 yards per carry this season. I don't really see any reason not to like CMC here. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, we're going to kind of lump them together. Now, projection-wise, I like Jahmyr Gibbs more, but I do think this is a really good spot for David Montgomery on the ground, as the Packers do not have a good run defense in these slightest, allowing over 100 rushing yards per game. But since David Montgomery has returned, he has not outsnapped Jahmyr Gibbs yet. So I'm pretty sure at this point, Jahmyr Gibbs has pretty much taken over that RB1 role. Now, it's more of like a 1A, 1B situation. Monty still has a solidified role on the ground, and he's going to get goal line carries. We saw that to win the game versus the Bears last week. But Jahmyr Gibbs has definitely carved out a bigger role in this offense, which is great to see because he is one of the most electric running backs, one of the best running backs in football, I think, at this point. There's a reason he was drafted high in the first round. The dude's great, kind of like Alvin Kamara, where he's great through the air and can do some damage on the ground, over 5 yards per carry this season on 12 carries per game and over 5 targets, which equates to a 16% target share. High implied team totals, so both are fine to me. If you need the savings, go with Montgomery. If it doesn't matter, go with Gibbs, and I like either. Tony Pollard, $6,700, finally found the end zone last week. Thank goodness, because I played him in a large chunk of my lineups. It's not like he went off for anything, but got me close to 17 points at $6,600. I'm not going to complain too much. It was kind of funny. It was a 20-yard touchdown. He dragged like 7 defenders in there and dove at the end because I'm pretty sure he knew if he got tackled on the one, there's no chance he's getting the ball again, because the way his season has gone, he is just not allowed to score touchdowns. But we got the 4 yards per carry last week, which is, I think, the highest we've seen it in quite some time. Now, the Commanders, while everyone's going to play the passing attack here, I like getting exposure to Pollard and GPPs in your non-Dak Prescott builds. Not saying you can't play them both together, but if everyone's going Dak and CeeDee Lamb in the passing attack, well, Pollard's just going to get a little bit overlooked. But if he's going to get us close to 20 touches, the Commanders are pretty much middle of the road versus running backs. And this game sets up perfect for him. 29.5 implied team total, which is the highest in the slate. 48.5 point over-under. 10.5 points spread in their favor. And like I said, they are at home in a good matchup and a good offense that can put up points. I mean, it's a really good spot for Pollard. Once again, it's not as good of a matchup versus the Panthers, but he definitely makes sense in tournaments. Then Zach Charbonnet, $5,300. So I'm assuming Kenneth Walker is going to be out for this one. He's dealing with a legit oblique strain. And he was actually already out snapping Kenneth Walker the previous 3 weeks. So he's going to be the main RB here. And it's a brutal matchup versus the 49ers, unfortunately. They're allowing the 8th fewest points per game to the position and only 60 rushing yards per game. And below us, 18-point implied team total in this one, 7-point dogs at home. But they do give up dump offs to running backs. I mean, no, Charbonnet was using the passing game prior to that. So if he's going to get us 10 plus carries on the ground and hopefully a handful of targets, it's okay at $5,300, but I'm not expecting a ceiling game by any means. All right, so we need 2 running backs here. I really like CMC. We're just going to plug him at $8,700, which I realize eats up a ton of salary. And at this point, I probably can't afford Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I might be able to. And at the end, if I can just plug him in, I will. But let's save a couple of dollars to go with David Montgomery. And while I do like Tony Pollard, I'm going with the passing game in Dallas in this one, so I'm going to leave him out for this specific build. When it comes to the wide receiver position, we have a ton of options, and I basically have every single one listed here. But keep in mind, it all comes down to your game stacks. And on such a small set like this, I am fine with triple stacking, maybe quadruple stacking, but that might be a bit nuts. Double bring back options. It's just such a small slate. We don't have the extra added flexibility of many options like on a 12 gamer. So on such a small slate like this one big play can amplify everything and put the guy in the optimal lineup. Like I normally wouldn't like Jameson Williams with my Jared Goff stacks on a main slate. But on a slate like this, if he happens to catch a 50-yard bomb, that's when it can work out, especially at $3,400. So for me specifically, we had Dak Prescott. So I'm going to want 3 at least options with him. And I do like Jake Ferguson, so I'm probably going to plug him in at tight end. That means we're going to need 2 wide receivers. And CeeDee Lamb, obviously the clear-cut choice. The dude's been an absolute menace ever since Dak Prescott got hot. And I mean, they just draw a dream matchup. Like I said, the Commanders are allowing the most points per game in the quarterback position, and they're allowing the 4th most points per game to wide receivers. So there's absolutely no reason not to like the passing attack here. So we're definitely plugging CD in when you have Dak Prescott. If you have Jared Goff, that's when you're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, Khalif Raymond, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams running back with guys like Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, because I don't really love them as projection plays, but we're just trying to make correlated lineups here. And then obviously some guys are going to be fine as one-offs. And then trying to find our second wide receiver, we're either looking at Brandon Cooks or Michael Gallup. And with Michael Gallup being about $1,000 cheaper than Brandon Cooks, and I already have CeeDee Lamb, I already have the most expensive quarterback, and I already have Christian McCaffrey, so I'm probably going to have to save a couple bucks here and there. If you're looking at their target shares on the season, both right around 14%, both seeing right around 4.5 targets and similar numbers overall. So I think Gallup would probably make the most sense so we can get some savings. And while I didn't mention them, don't forget if you have Brock Purdy or Geno Smith, although I wouldn't recommend that, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, who happens to play very well versus Seattle for whatever reason. George Kittle running back with guys like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. It all just comes down to your stack, so I'm not going to take the time to go over them each and individually because you're kind of wasting your time there. If you have the quarterback, throw some pass catchers with them because they're not going to get there themselves. All right, so filling out our wide receiver slots, like I said, CeeDee Lamb's a lock if you have Dak Prescott. I mean, you can make some without CeeDee Lamb, although they're probably just not going to project that well, which, projections aren't everything, but I would have a hard time seeing Dak Prescott go off without CeeDee Lamb having a great game as well, and both can be the same for either way. And then we're going to plug in Michael Gallup just to save a couple of bucks. Now, I would love to be able to fit in Terry McLaurin, but at this point, I have below $4,000 left in my remaining 4 slots. So if I hypothetically put him in, it's going to put us at $3,500, which I guess would be fine with a cheap defense. But for right now, I'm going to keep it blank, and we'll just try to see who fits at the end. A lot of what I said at the wide receiver position can be applied here to tight ends, just there's not as many of them available as wide receivers. But if you have Brock Purdy, George Kittle would definitely be a very preferred option versus Seattle. We know that the talent is there, the upside is there, the touchdown scoring upside is there every single week for George Kittle. It's just he doesn't get as much volume, but it's definitely a more efficient offense than others. Sam Laporte, though, if you have Jared Goff, he makes sense. Although the production seems like it's gone down a little bit, and the opportunities, we're now below 7 targets per game, which it was above 7.5, but he's still a fine option versus the Packers. Jake Ferguson with Dak Prescott in my specific build below 4K. He runs a ton of routes and he's on the field pretty much the entire game, so it's hard not to like him, getting over 5 targets per game, and he's going to have touchdown upside. And then below, we just have run back options for cheap if you need them. Logan Thomas in a Dallas Cowboys stack. If you don't happen to go with Ferguson, you can slide him in the tight end spot. Now, I don't normally play double tight end, but on the Thanksgiving slate, I always tend to at least have some lineups with it. Then Luke Musgrave, he just gets targets. It's not an offense that I get too excited about, but they're going to be trailing. So if he can get you 5+ here, maybe he falls into the end zone. In defense, it's pretty ugly on this slate. Obviously, the 3 cheapest ones are going to be the 3 underdogs, 7.5 points for the Packers, 7 points for the Seahawks, and 10.5 for the Commanders. I would try to avoid them, but they might filter into some lineups, which I'd understand. Obviously, the top 3 are going to be the ones that are at the highest owned. I personally like the Lions a lot, or the 49ers, because we know Geno Smith's dealing with a bit of an injury. 17.5 implied team total, 17.75 implied team total. 7-point favorites on the road in Seattle. Then you have the Lions at home versus Jordan Love, who we know can definitely turn the ball over and make some mistakes. I like the Cowboys, they're just expensive, and I want that game to be kind of high scoring, so I'll probably lean more towards 49ers Lions, but I'll have exposure to all of them. All right, so let's knock this lineup out. We already have our 2 pass catchers with Dak Prescott. I'm going to get my 3rd one here. We're going to throw in Jake Ferguson at only $3,900, which feels like a pretty fair price point. We have David Montgomery, so I think the Lions defense's correlation would be fine. Also wouldn't hate the 49ers, but we can save a little bit of dough there. So we have 2 spots left, $8,700 to do it, so we're going to have to live in like the 4K range. At wide receiver, I don't mind going with Dotson, because if I go with McLaurin at $5,400, we're going to be left with 33. Now, I just don't think there's any wide receivers I like at $3,300. We might be able to go tight end, because I think, Musgrave's $3,300. So that's a viable way to go. I wouldn't hate it. But if you don't want to go double tight end, we can take Terry out and throw in a guy like Jahan Dotson at $4,600. Obviously not going to be as consistent or have the same kind of ceiling, but we have seen him pop off from time and time again. If they're going to be trailing, I don't hate that. Then we have $4,100 left for the last spot. So we're out of tight end range. We might be able to get a decent wide receiver. Obviously running backs off the table. But yeah, we can get JSN there at $4,100, and we've seen his role increase the past, since week 7, 16, 12, 12, 9, 7 fantasy points, but typically getting you 5 to 7 targets each week. And he's been used down the field more, which we didn't see early on in the season. So actually, that's a pretty good lineup, and it fits like a glove. So we have Dak Prescott, triple stacked with CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Jake Ferguson in dream matchups, ran back with Dotson. We have CMC and Montgomery at running back, and we have the Lions defense correlated with David Montgomery, which I don't mind. They have JSN because he's the last piece fit, but honestly, good looking build. I'm not saying to use this. I never build these lineups for everyone to copy and paste. I am just simply following the rules that I give you guys every single week with the players that we talk about and throw it in a lineup. I'm going to be playing 150 though, so maybe it falls into one, but I think the roster construction looks good. And as per usual, I do want to show you guys who's populating in the optimizer as of right now. Now keep in mind, it is Tuesday morning. I have ran 1 set of projections. I don't have ownership up yet, and a lot is going to change. Probably, maybe not a lot, but a decent amount will change by the time Thursday afternoon kicks off for us. So keep in mind that these are not final by any means, and I do have some updating that I will need to do, especially with some injury concerns with Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, and Antonio Gibson as well, and a couple of other guys that we are watching. But I put very minimal stacking settings on, put a little bit of randomness, and ran it really quick. And I got to be honest, I'm not really too surprised here. Christian McCaffrey, the number 1. It's just he has such a positional advantage on everybody else at the position this week. And while CeeDee Lamb also is number 1, got to keep in mind that there's also like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, other guys that can compete. Jake Ferguson makes sense because I want pass catchers with Dak Prescott. And it's just feeding into that, and he's cheap. Run back option, Logan Thomas being cheap makes sense with Curtis Samuel. So it looks like it's really stacking up that Washington-Dallas game, which is to be expected. CeeDee Lamb's populating a ton. Terry McLaurin, Tony Pollard, JSN, Amon-Ra. Look at the teams that's populating the most. I'm assuming Dallas is going to lead the way, then Detroit, Washington. So the two top teams with the implied team totals north of 25 being the highest does make some sense. And obviously all these games are going to be highly owned just because, well, there's only 3 games and we really don't have many to pick from. But with that being said, that's all I got for today's video. So I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, even if you didn't, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you all next time.